It is wonderful to be here. Whenever I get invited to come to Antietam Institute, it feels like coming and talking to family, really. So it's wonderful to be here. I'm grateful to come for another summer lecture, and what a great place to be. Although I love the outdoors, not having to worry about rain or bugs right now is also pretty nice. So thank you for being out here tonight. As Laura kindly said, we're going to be looking at Winfield Scott Hancock and his role at the Sunken Road. And Laura and I were musing before we got started here that I spoke to Antietam Institute about John Pelham early in my research for the book that is now here. And tonight I find myself in a similar situation where I've been digging into the primary sources, into the official records, going after other letters, diary entries, things like that, for a future project and hopefully book on Winfield Scott Hancock. And I was telling my mom on my drive here, I really want to write that Antietam chapter after working on my notes for this talk. So let's dive in. Directed to take command, Winfield as Hancock and Antietam's Sunken Road. Now I'm just going to admit it from the beginning. Antietam is not Hancock's battle. Antietam is not Hancock's battlefield. There are a number of other generals who are going to have their high moments, their climactic battlefield leadership, time in the spotlight, some to their great demise, here at Antietam. So we don't find General Hancock leading a charge. We actually find him taking command at a position when it looks like the fighting is over. But I want to challenge our thinking and pretend that we don't know how the story ends. Hancock doesn't know that the fighting near Sunken Road is now done, essentially, when he comes to take command as McClellan directs him. So we have to hold back and remember they don't know what comes next, and that it's really not going to be much of anything in that Sunken Road area. Hancock is being sent to take command of a crucial position in the Union battle lines. He's also stepping up into division command. He's been a brigade commander. We're going to delve into Hancock's official record. We're going to talk about some of the topography and what's going on at the Sunken Road as he comes into his leadership point. But one thing I want us to do before we get to Antietam is take a little step back. What else has happened in Hancock's life to make him the leader, the general that he is by September 1862? So let's go all the way back. February 14th, Valentine's Day. If you don't like to celebrate Valentine's Day, you can celebrate Winfield Scott Hancock's birthday. He was born in 1824, and he was a twin. His brother's name was Hillary, but brother. He is named after the War of 1812 General Winfield Scott. He grows up in the town of Norristown, Pennsylvania, and attends West Point, graduating in the class of 1844. And for those of you who like to keep the tally marks of where generals, future generals, graduate in their classes, Hancock was 18th out of 25. He goes into an infantry assignment, and his knowledge of infantry tactics coming from West Point and then throughout his military career will sometimes put him in conflict with artillery commanders who are using other sets of tactics and ideas on Civil War battlefields. Hancock's early taste of combat comes during the Mexican-American War, a conflict fought between 1846 and 1848, part of American expansionism and the idea of manifest destiny. Hancock is a brevet second lieutenant in the 6th United States Infantry. His first posting will be in so-called Indian Territory in the Red River Valley, and as soon as that war with Mexico breaks out, he is anxious to get to the front to prove himself in a combat setting. Unfortunately for Hancock, he's really good at convincing guys to join the army. So he's on recruiting duty for a while, Eventually, in July 1847, he's allowed to join his regiment at Puebla, Mexico, and under the command of General Winfield Scott, who he was named after, he will make the march toward Mexico City. Hancock sees combat fighting at Contreras and Churubusco. He will win a promotion as brevet first lieutenant. And if you're like me and wondering what does brevet mean, the way I like to think of it is you get the pay and the title, but you don't necessarily have the full command or all the responsibilities of that rank that's being given you. It's honorary. That's the way I like to try to remember it and simplify it. Hancock's wounded in the knee at Churubusco. He does not take part in the final capture of Mexico City, but he's had his taste of combat and has performed well. Peacetime army in 19th century America is kind of boring, at least at first, but Hancock gets sent to a number of interesting places. For a while, he will serve as quartermaster and adjutant for his regiment. He's very frustrated. He feels he'll be stuck as a quartermaster officer forever. He does not see a way to climb the ladder of rank, and he's concerned that his career will sort of stagnate as a quartermaster, just moved from post to post. He is good friends with Henry Heath. In their time coming back from Mexico, they have some escapades, which none of them write about in full detail, which always leaves some question marks. But we find Hancock performing military duties in the Midwest, and then eventually settling at the post of Jefferson Barracks in Missouri. It's in Missouri where Hancock meets Elmira Russell. They will marry on January 24th, 1850. And there's some humorous correspondence that comes to light shortly after the wedding, and as the young couple is trying to settle into officer quarters in their barracks. There's this correspondence between Hancock and another, at the time, U.S. officer named Braxton Bragg, future Confederate general, and they're writing about doors and hinges. Bragg can't figure out why a young married couple is frustrated that their doors don't close. I'll just leave it at that. Hancock and his young family survive a cholera epidemic. He tries various homeopathic remedies to keep those safe around the posts and barracks. He receives a promotion in 1853 to first lieutenant. So now he had the brevet, the honor rank, if you will. Now he has the full duties and command responsibilities of that rank. 2 years later, he promotes to captain, so he's slowly making his way up, but not as fast as other friends around him, and he still fears being stuck as a quartermaster. The following year, 1856, Hancock is sent to Florida, to Fort Myers specifically, an outpost in the middle of a swamp. He takes his family with him, which now includes their young son. Mrs. Hancock is the only woman on post, and it is there that their daughter will be born. Hancock is present for the end of the Third Seminole War, and after negotiations wrap up with that situation, he is sent to Kansas for 9 months. This is the time when Kansas territory is called Bloody Kansas, because you have free soilers who are trying to make sure that Kansas comes into the Union as a free state, no slavery, and they are in conflict with those that are rushing into Kansas, trying to make sure it can be a slave state. It's been turned over to popular sovereignty, and there is blood and conflict throughout that territory with the struggle of what will it become. 1858, Hancock is sent on an expedition to Utah to try to quell some of the difficulties going on with members of the Latter-day Saints who had moved out to that territory. He's made it to Utah. He thinks he's going to turn around and come back across the Great Plains to where his family is, but actually they're going to send him into California, over the Sierra Nevada mountains into the new state on the West Coast. Hancock finds out that he's going to be stationed in California. He's allowed to make a return to the East Coast. He makes arrangements to meet up with his wife and children, and he's preparing to return to California for his post of duty. None other than Robert Edward Lee convinces Mrs. Hancock to go with her husband to California. The family will make the trip by boat to the Isthmus of Panama, cross on mule, get on another ship, and go up the coast of California. Hancock becomes the commander of United States troops in Los Angeles. It's a very small outpost, but it becomes very important as the tensions that lead to the Civil War heat up. The Pony Express is still carrying the news from the east to the west. In 1860 and 1861, telegraph wires will be strung during the war itself. But they're relying on the news carried by the Pony Express, and it's in this way that Hancock finds out about the results of the presidential election in 1860, about the firing on Fort Sumter. And there's correspondence, there's discussion going on amongst other United States officers posted in California, like his longtime Army friend, he's Winfield Scott Hancock, his longtime friend Lewis Armistead. He also knows Albert Sidney Johnston, who's posted in California as well. There's a farewell gathering held at the Hancock home, which will later rise to fictional proportions in later novels. We see officers coming together and grappling with that question of what do you do when your home state secedes? What do you do with your oath to the United States as a military officer? Hancock made it clear that he would have no hard feelings against his comrades or friends if they were choosing to join the Confederacy, but his choice was clear. He would stay a Union man. Hancock will help keep Southern California in the Union. There's great studies or books that have been done on this, so I'm not going to dive deep into it. We want to get to Antietam and look at battle reports and topography here. But I want to point out that Hancock has stood up for the Union flag. He has helped to keep a rebellious city in the Union until other federal troops can arrive. He is recognized for this, but he's still a quartermaster, and he doesn't know what's going to happen as he's being recalled to the east to take part in the Civil War. I missed my slide for California, pardon me. This is a sketch of what Los Angeles looked like in the 1850s. Very different from the large metropolis that it is today. All right, so as Hancock returns to the east, there is the organization of the Army of the Potomac. The first battle of the war has already been fought at First Bull Run, First Manassas, first major battle of the conflict, and now what will become the Army of the Potomac is starting to be recruited and formed. Hancock, as a career Army officer, has military background, of course. He is given a rank and promotion to Brigadier General of Volunteers on September 23rd, 1861. And his wife was really excited about this. She just saw it as this huge jump over ranks. She was understandably very proud of her husband. She was kind of bragging about it to another officer they knew, who responded a little more pragmatically, saying, "That's all right, but if a cannon were fired down Pennsylvania Avenue, it would strike 100 or more newly created brigadiers." Whoops. So if we have all these brigadier generals around DC coming into the Army of the Potomac, how are they going to start to continue the rise in rank, continue the leadership steps up? And you will see a struggle for leadership because there are plenty of generals in the Army of the Potomac, but not all of them know what to do. Hancock will command a brigade in William F. Baldy Smith's division, and Smith would note that during the winter of 1861 to 1862, he, Hancock, was unremittingly in giving military instruction of all kinds to his officers and in his attention to the comforts and welfare of his men. And this is a leadership style that begins to define Hancock as he's in these large leadership roles throughout the Civil War. Hancock steps into the Civil War moment with an understanding of logistics and how the Army works. All those years that he was kind of griping about being a quartermaster, he now has an advantage. He knows how armies are put together. He knows how the paperwork should be filled out, things like that. He spent time reading military treatises for fun, for continuing education, as we might say now. Hancock spent a lot of time training the troops under his command when he had time. He was known to swear a lot. Some felt that that sort of created a bond between him and the men under his command. And Hancock seems to have managed that fine line of being aloof enough to hold his position of command and yet friendly enough that the soldier under his command felt and knew that Hancock cared about him as an individual. It is a hallmark of troops under Hancock's command. Most of them, in their writings, believe Hancock cared about them. He keeps this up in camp and field. One of the things that was a little bit unique that he would do and his men would comment on that probably did set him apart from their soldiering experience was they always noticed his white shirts. They cannot figure out how he always had a clean white shirt. Like on a daily basis in 1864 in the Overland Campaign, quite a few soldiers comment on it. Throughout the war, Hancock stays out of Army politics. This is another thing that's going to be important to his leadership style and how he interacts with his peers and his superiors in Army chain of command. His wife was his confidant. He wrote to her. She did not leak what he wrote to the press, but that was sort of how he would process what was on his mind in a way that he knew it wasn't going to be shared, it wasn't going to affect his career negatively. Moving into 1862, we find the Army of the Potomac taking part in the Peninsula Campaign. Hancock leads a counterattack at the Battle of Williamsburg in the beginning of May. Following that battle, McClellan's going to send a telegraph with the famous quote, "Hancock was superb today," giving the general a nickname that would stick with him through the rest of the Civil War, the rest of his military career, and even when he went into politics later on. Hancock and his men would also fight at Golding's Farm, but on the whole, in the Peninsula Campaign, although they make the march to the gates of Richmond, there's not a lot of action that he's involved in compared to some of the other generals, some of the other brigades. But here's the thing. Hancock did what he was asked to do, and McClellan notices that. There's another thing that's noteworthy. As the Army of the Potomac has fallen back off the peninsula, they're gathering around Washington. Union General John Pope and the Army of Virginia are fighting the Battle of Second Bull Run or Second Manassas. McClellan is not sending a lot of troops to be involved with that, still trying to sort out everyone coming back from the peninsula. It's on August 27th that a man named Herman Haupt, who's in charge of railroads and is a quartermaster with the Union Army, he is in a slight panic, as much of a panic as Herman Haupt can get in. He is trying to get rations to the Union troops who are near Manassas. The supplies there had been burned by Confederate General Stonewall Jackson and his troops. There are Union soldiers still out in that field. Haupt needs to get food to them. And because he knows there's still Confederates in the area and Confederate cavalry who could possibly swing in and raid a railroad line, Herman Haupt wants infantry to go along as an escort with a supply train. When Haupt wakes up Hancock in the early morning hours and is asking for this, he also reveals that he had already gone to General McClellan, who had been unable to make a decision about which troops to send or what to do in the moment. That doesn't work for Haupt, who's worried about the guys who need their breakfast or their dinner. So Haupt has permission from General-in-Chief Halleck, and he goes to Hancock, who responds. Hancock will send the 2nd New Jersey, the 11th and 12th Ohio, as an escort with these supplies. And it's this moment where we see Hancock making a decision, not hesitating. Now, I don't want this to turn into a Hancock versus McClellan comparison. They are at different levels, if you will, of making a decision. McClellan is thinking, okay, McClellan's trying to think probably too big in this moment. Hancock is able to find a few regiments who can go with him. But the point that I want to make here is McClellan is aware of this. Hancock made a decision, found a solution, and saw it carried out. This brings us into Maryland. According to an official report that Hancock wrote, quote, during the operations before Crampton's Pass, during the Battle of South Mountain, on the 13th, my brigade was held in reserve and was not engaged with the enemy, end quote. Very simply lets us know he's not engaged in the Battle of South Mountain. Hancock and his brigade will cross said mountain on the 14th of September. They do have to send back the 6th Maine Infantry Regiment to help secure the gap against a possible threat. And according to Hancock's report, quote, pursued the enemy on the main road toward Harper's Ferry, end quote. Hancock does not go all the way to Harper's Ferry, neither do his troops. They will come back as McClellan is beginning to align the army along Antietam Creek and prepare for the battle that will take place on September 17th. Hancock is with the 6th Corps. And if you're a Hancock fan, this is not the corps that we associate him with, because we normally think about Hancock in his high moments at, oh, I don't know, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, the Overland Campaign battles, and he's with a different corps. The change is actually going to happen here at Antietam, but I want us to remember he's with the 6th Corps. And I took a screenshot from Antietam on the web, super helpful resource for which I am often grateful for. And if you love order of battle, we've got it here for you. The brigade that Hancock is commanding is in the 2nd Division of the 6th Corps. He's got the 1st Brigade. And they will arrive at Antietam Battlefield on the morning of the 17th. In Hancock's report for this brigade in the 6th Corps, because he actually has to write 2 reports, he says that they arrived on the battleground in front of Keedysville about 9 o'clock a.m. and subsequently led the advance of Franklin's corps to support the right wing under the command of Major General Sumner, then fiercely engaged and hard pressed by the enemy. They're coming up into the area along the cornfield and along East Woods. The infantry will come into support of several artillery batteries. Hancock will help to place Cowan's battery, provide support for them. As the infantry regiments under his command are beginning to deploy and prepare to go into action if called upon, Hancock goes to the 49th Pennsylvania as he's leading them toward the East Woods, and he says, quote, men, I am about to lead you into the presence of the enemy. But stand by the old flag today, and it will be all right. Hancock and his troops come under fire, but they are not sent in to the attacks. They are not severely engaged in the fighting up in that area. In his report, he will note, our loss in the infantry was slight as the men were lying down during the cannonading. And it's in this moment that some other things are happening on other parts of the battlefield. So we have to leave Hancock for a moment with his brigade, with them lying down under fire, ready to support and defend artillery. And let's switch over to what's happening at the Sunken Road, which is a different location than Hancock is at this moment. Here's what's happening with Richardson's division. And this is the 1st Division of the Union's 2nd Corps. This comes from Hancock's report of the battle. And I'm not normally in favor of reading long passages of primary sources. But I think in this case, since we're doing a deeper dive, it is helpful to read. And you can see up at the top of the screen, we have Sumner. You might see the Corps commander's name. And then right below, you'll see Richardson and the attack arrows coming in. We're not going to deep dive into what every regiment is doing, but let's get a sense of what this division is going through and has been through by the time they will meet Hancock. About 9:30 a.m. on the 17th, the division, commanded by General Richardson, crossed the Antietam at the ford constructed by our engineers, then moved forward on a line nearly parallel to the creek, formed in line of battle by brigades in a ravine behind the high ground overlooking Roulette's house. Mahar's brigade, the Irish brigade, immediately advanced and soon became engaged with the enemy posted to the left and in front of Roulette's house. This brigade continued its advance under heavy fire until near the crest of the hill overlooking Piper's house, advancing toward the sunken road, the enemy being posted in a strong force in a sunken road directly in its front. A severe and well-sustained musketry contest then ensued, which, after continuing until the ammunition was nearly expended, this brigade, having suffered severely, losing many valuable officers and men, was by the direction of General Richardson relieved by the brigade of General Caldwell, which until this time had remained in support. Caldwell's brigade advanced to within a short distance of the rear of Mahar's brigade. The latter then broke by companies to the rear, and the former by companies to the front, and in this manner passed their respective lines. Caldwell's brigade immediately advanced to the crest overlooking the sunken road, and about 30 yards distant from it, and at once became engaged in a most desperate contest. The enemy then occupying that position in great strength, supported by other troops in their rear toward the Piper's house. At this time, Colonel Brooks' brigade formed a second line in support of Caldwell's brigade, the regiment of General Mahar's brigade retiring to the rear to replenish their ammunition, having received an order to that effect from General Richardson. We'll skip ahead a little bit in the report. I'm skipping over the description of the fighting around the roulette farm and sending certain regiments to counter the Confederates there. The enemy was reinforced by fresh troops during the contest, his first line having been driven off the field. Finally, an advance was made from this position to the Piper House by the brigade of Caldwell and 2 regiments under Colonel Brooke. Under heavy fire of musketry and artillery, the enemy having a section of brass pieces in front, firing grape, and a battery to the right, throwing shell. This advance drove the enemy from the field, gave us possession of the house and its surroundings, the citadel of the enemy at this position of the line, it being a defensible building several hundred yards to the rear of the sunken road first referred to. This having been accomplished, the musketry firing at this point ceased. At the time the enemy broke on the right, which has just been described, when Colonel Brooke advanced toward Roulette's house, Colonel Frank of the 52nd New York Volunteers, then in command of that regiment and the 2nd Delaware, also observing a movement to our right and rear, changed front obliquely to the right, became engaged in the flank of the enemy's advance, and performed an active part in frustrating his intended movement. Colonel Barlow, commanding the 61st and 64th Regiments of New York Volunteers, observing the same movement of the enemy to the right, changed front and delivered his fire, performing good service in checking the attempt to turn our flank, causing the surrender of 300 prisoners and capturing 2 colors. Having possession of the Piper House by direction of General Richardson, the line was withdrawn a short distance to take position on a crest, which formed a more advantageous line. This is the area that's being talked about. The sunken road has now been flanked and captured in the official report. They've advanced out toward the white barn that you can see toward the top of the screen, but then Richardson has pulled the men back to a ridge between. Up to this time, the division was without artillery, and in taking up the new position, it suffered severely from artillery fire which could not be replied to. A section of Robertson's battery of horse artillery, commanded by Lieutenant Vincent, then arrived on the ground and did excellent service. Subsequently, a battery of brass guns of Porter's Corps, commanded by Captain Graham, also arrived and was posted on the same line. A heavy fire then ensued between the enemy's artillery and ours finally retiring, being unable to reach the enemy, who used rifled guns, ours being smoothbores. General Richardson was severely wounded about this time while directing the movement of the troops and while personally directing the fire of one of our batteries. General Mahar's brigade, having refilled their cartridge boxes, returned at this time and took position in the center of the line. General Mahar had his horse shot under him in the action of his brigade, and in falling received bruises which prevented him returning to the field until the next morning. This is a division of troops that have fought really hard. They have attacked the sunken road. They have pushed through Confederate defenses. They have seized quite a piece of ground. The roulette farm has been taken. The sunken road has been taken. But now their division commander, Israel Richardson, is down wounded. A brigade commander, Thomas Francis Mahar, is down. There's also a lot of regimental officers who've been wounded or killed. Smoothbore artillery has been forced to retire from supporting this position. So we have a division in a bit of a desperate situation should the Confederates decide to launch a counterattack. And this brings us to McClellan's orders. According to Hancock, early in the afternoon, after General Richardson had been removed from the field, I was directed to take command of his division by Major General McClellan in person. Which of course raises the question, is this while McClellan's out riding some lines? Is Hancock near the forward observation post at the Pry House? Where does this happen? If anyone in the room has the answer, let's chat afterwards. I'm still doing some digging on this. It would be something I would love to dig into and understand a little bit better. But in person, McClellan delivers this order. And then it brings us to that question, why Hancock? Why are you going to send him to take command of this division? He already has a brigade that's sitting under fire, even though they aren't advancing at the moment. And it might be part of that. He's commanding a brigade that's not heavily engaged at that moment. But then think back to what McClellan has observed with Hancock already. He's not involved in army politics, so he's not a major threat to McClellan in that way. He was superb, in McClellan's own words, at Williamsburg, and he had responded well, solved the problem in the Manassas campaign just a couple weeks earlier. These might be things that factor in to part of McClellan's decision. Hancock is sent to take command. He's coming to a field that is filled with casualties, a line of troops that is in a vulnerable position under artillery fire and not supported by their own artillery. And I want us to think about the concept that the Union could be saved on any day on any large battlefield. There's the argument to be made that that battlefield up in Pennsylvania is Hancock's battlefield. There's a pretty good argument for that. But Hancock doesn't know if today, September 17th, 1862, is the day that he steps into a position where he's going to help save the Union, or if it's months down the road, or never. He's there to do his duty as a soldier, and he's going to do that to the best of his ability. Probably about mid-afternoon, maybe 3 p.m. or so, Hancock goes on, having received orders and those of Major General Sumner, so now he's heard from McClellan and Sumner. I proceeded to the ground and found that the division occupied the right center of our lines. My instructions were to hold that position against the enemy. I found the troops occupying one line of battle in close proximity to the enemy, who was then again in position behind Piper's house. The 14th Connecticut Regiment and a detachment from the 108th New York Volunteers, both under command of Colonel Dwight Morris, were in reserve. The whole command numbering about 2,100 men with no artillery. It keeps coming up in these reports. So we find Hancock making preparations in case the Confederates counterattack and giving orders. He goes up to one regiment. I'm not sure which one, but he's recorded as saying, "Now men, stay there until you are ordered away. This place must be held at all hazards." This is getting ready for a counterattack. He's not leaving anything to chance here. In the report, Hancock goes on, finding a considerable interval at a dangerous point between Mahar's brigade, then commanded Colonel Burke, and Caldwell's brigade. The 14th Connecticut was placed there, and the detachment from the 108th New York Volunteers on the extreme left. He's shuffling infantry to fill these gaps that he's identifying. Then, application was made for 2 batteries of artillery to the different commanders within reach and to the chief of artillery, but none could be spared at that time. I felt able, however, to hold the position as I had been instructed. Notwithstanding this deficiency and the fact that the troops were already suffering severely from the shells of the enemy, relying upon the good qualities of the troops, but was too weak to make an attack unless an advance was made on the right, as I had no reserves, and the line was already enfiladed from its forward position by the enemy's artillery in front of our right wing, which was screened from the fire of our artillery on the right by a belt of woods yet in possession of the enemy. It's a division under fire. He's telling us in our report, I can't go forward, but I'll hold the position. And it's interesting looking at some of those other Union artillery commanders in their reports. General Hunt, in his report for Antietam, mentions Hancock applying to him for artillery. And there's nothing that suggests it was a negative request or anything. There are other artillery commanders that say Hancock asked. I wasn't able to do anything at the time. So this checks out. We've got multiple sources confirming artillery's on Hancock's mind. Hold the position, get some artillery up there if possible. He's securing the center, a center that has already been fought over where heavy casualties have happened. Picking up again with his report, sometime after arriving on the ground, a command of the enemy was seen in line of battle, preceded by skirmishers, advancing in a direction parallel to our front and toward a command of ours situated to the front of my left, whose line was formed at near right angles with mine. I immediately sent a pressing message for a battery of artillery, and Captain Hexamer of Slocum's division of General Franklin's corps was sent to me. The enemy, after a short cannonading, was forced to retire. In a short time, an advance was made by some of our troops on my right toward the rear of the Piper House, the enemy appearing to make preparations to meet them. I assisted these troops by the fire of this battery, and subsequently seeing our troops returning, prevented pursuit. This advance proved to have been made by a single regiment, the 7th Maine, without concert of action with other troops. During this time and previously, the entire command suffered a severe cannonading from the enemy's artillery and was also much annoyed by his sharpshooters. The battery above referred to, having no ammunition, retired and was replaced with Kirby's battery, commanded by Lieutenant Woodruff. And he notes, with 12-pounder brass guns. Captain Tidball's battery had been in position a considerable distance from our extreme left, and toward evening that officer placed a section on the elevated ridge on the left of my line, which did material service by the precision of its fire in concealing the weakness of our position. This section was withdrawn about dark. Affairs remained in this position during the night. Our pickets were thrown forward as far as practicable, in parentheses, a very short distance. The next morning, a battery of light 12-pounders, commanded by Lieutenant Evan Thomas, reported to me, replaced the battery, commanded by Lieutenant Woodruff. Captain Pettit's battery of rifled guns also reported, and was placed in a commanding position on our left. The day passed in this position, I having been directed in the morning by orders from the Commander-in-Chief, McClellan, not to precipitate hostilities, as he expected some reinforcements to arrive before he desired to recommence movements to the front. Receiving no further instructions during the day, I continued to await the operations of other portions of the line. The enemy's sharpshooters commenced at an early hour on the morning of the 18th, firing upon our troops, and so continued during the day. Their fire was replied to by our pickets and by others detailed for this service. Hancock's report goes on. The next big thing that happens on the 18th in front of his line is a confusion over flag of truce. He keeps sending out officers, including General Mahar, to meet the flag of truce bearers. They're trying to figure out, is this an official flag of truce? Is it just in front of our line? Who has authority for this? And we see Hancock trying to follow a proper chain of command, trying to follow the protocol of that. And he says a good deal of uncertainty, no doubt, arose from the operations, rendering it doubtful on both sides whether or not a truce existed. The troops remained in position until the following morning, now September 19th, when it was found the enemy had retreated. We then advanced to their position and commenced the operation of collecting the remaining wounded, burying the dead of both forces, and piling the captured arms. We find Hancock commanding something much bigger. Again, if you love order of battle, here it is. It might be a little small to see on the screen, so check it out on Antietam on the web later if it is helpful. But just the visual of it. We've gone from a brigade under his command to now he is temporarily commanding 3 infantry brigades and artillery if it was available to his command. As Hancock has been ordered to take command of Richardson's division, and as the battle has come to its end, he has to write 2 battle reports, both of which are in the official records. He writes one for his brigade over in the 6th Corps, and then he writes one for the division. What stood out to me as he's writing the report for Richardson's division is he must have been talking to those brigade commanders to know what had happened, because Hancock's not present when these attacks are happening on the Sunken Road itself. And yet it is not a half-hearted report. It's not, oh yeah, attacks were made and then I took command and here's all the details. There's effort that was made in this report. And yes, I'm sure there's some things that are not lining up right and it's not exactly the way it happened. We know that's the case with almost all official reports. But the time that he put into this, it shows that he's working with this division's staff officers, he's working with the other officers to make sure that they get a report that well reflects what they did. Toward the end of that report, he'll note some of the successes in the military sense and then casualties incurred by this division. He'll note that 9 regimental colors and battle flags were taken on the field from the enemy by this division. Quote, about 400 prisoners were captured, about 4,000 muskets collected on the field in front of the division and piled. And then he goes on, our loss was as follows: 207 killed, 940 wounded, 16 missing, total casualties 1,163. Quote, our troops behaved in the handsomest manner and performed the part assigned to them successfully and with promptness, and in passing through the trying ordeal exhibited the soldiers' noblest qualities. I regret that some of the most valuable officers of the division were killed and many wounded, some of them those who had distinguished themselves on many previous fields. And then the report goes on and specifically lists and commends officers by brigade. Again, possibly staff officer writing this, providing extra detail. But I find it remarkable that Hancock puts his name on this report, and since we know he has background with military papers, we know he knows what official reports are, he has got to be involved in this process as well. And yet, it's not his division. He's in temporary command. We see a respect, we see a military professionalism reflected in this report as he's coming in, as he's trying to work with the brigade commanders to secure that center and then produce the report afterwards. The outcomes at Antietam for Winfield Scott Hancock is that it brings his active leadership to a key position. They don't know what's going to happen beyond the Sunken Road in that strip of high ground held onto by Richardson's men. It's an area that if the Confederates are able to push through, you're going to see artillery that is helping to cover the middle bridge being threatened. It's an area where if the Confederates punch through, there can be more attacks headed toward other parts of the Union battlefield where fierce fighting has occurred, where there's other divisions or corps in desperate circumstances as well. Hancock is going to help Richardson's division hold a position they had already captured. He's going to move some of the infantry to fill gaps that he sees in the line. He advocates to get artillery up there, and he helps them hold steady under that fierce, enfilading fire that they're getting from other parts of the battlefield and Confederate artillery positions. Artillery stands out as something Hancock was worried about, both with his men under artillery fire and then getting batteries up to counter those guns. He On later battlefields, we will see him wanting artillery to fire as a way to encourage the infantry, to let them know that they're not under this without support. We don't know if that's what he wants to do. It could have possibly been something, but it seems to me like he wants to bring artillery up to support this position, to secure that area, secure that center as he sees it. As we move beyond Antietam, and the rest of Hancock's military career, we find out that Richardson's division, that 1st Division of the 2nd Corps, it will become Hancock's division. When he was sent to take that temporary command at Antietam, that will eventually turn into a more permanent command for him. He will lead that division at Fredericksburg. He will ride down sloping ground under fire 3 times with each of those 3 brigades, sending them toward yet another sunken road, but this one that the division could not break into at the Battle of First Fredericksburg. At the Battle of Chancellorsville, Hancock still commands the 1st Division of the 2nd Corps. He and his troops will help to act as a rear guard as the Union Army is starting to retreat back toward what becomes Hooker's last line, anchored on the Rappahannock River. One of my favorite accounts of Hancock is there's troops just running at him on a road leading past Chancellorsville, and they are panicking about this and that, and what about a rear guard and all of this, and Hancock just tells the man to stop. I've got the rear guard. You continue retreating in order. We have got the rear covered. Again, stepping into that leadership position in a moment of crisis. As the armies begin to turn northward toward Pennsylvania in the summer of 1863, Hancock is in command of the entire 2nd Corps. He is highly trusted by the newest commander of the Army of the Potomac, George Gordon Meade, and as many will argue, Gettysburg is Hancock's battlefield. He is instrumental in securing Union high ground and moving troops to threatened positions, particularly on July 2nd and 3rd. On the 3rd day of the Battle of Gettysburg, Hancock is wounded. This is a wound that will trouble him for the rest of his life. He is out of command through the fall of 1863, returns, tries to come back to active field duty for the Overland Campaign in the spring of 1864. He makes it through most of the campaign, but it is in severe discomfort, pain from his old injury, and by the time the army has moved toward Petersburg, they're going through the autumn months, Hancock is beginning to look for duties that would not be quite as active. He will end up commanding the 1st Veteran Corps, so troops who have perhaps been wounded, been ill, they're not returning back to full duty, but they're going to serve out the rest of their enlistments. They're physically able to do that. They're going to form the 1st Veteran Corps. Hancock will take command of them at Winchester, Virginia, where he will oversee negotiations for the disbanding of Colonel John Mosby's Rangers at the end of the war in 1865. Hancock's military career continues on beyond the end of the Civil War. He has the grim duty of overseeing the execution of the assassination conspirators, those who had tried or did attempt to kill Abraham Lincoln and other high government officials. He'll take command of the Department of the Missouri. Then he's transferred to the 5th Military District. This is in the Reconstruction era, so it includes overseeing Louisiana and Texas in the Reconstruction period. He'll be moved again to take command of the Department of Dakota, and then come east one last time to command the prestigious Division of the Atlantic. Then Hancock runs for president in 1880. Against another former Union general and veteran, James Garfield. In our list of presidents, we do not have Winfield Scott Hancock. It was James Garfield who won the election. Hancock himself did not seem much disturbed by the news, and it was an era where the partisanship around politics was intense, and Hancock made a stand and set forth a positive example, shall we say, by insisting that he wanted to go to the inauguration of James Garfield. That was something that was not expected. The animosities were high, but by doing that, he was trying to symbolize a coming together of the country in the political sense. One of his last military duties was overseeing General Ulysses S. Grant's funeral. Winfield Scott Hancock himself died on February 9th, 1886, at the age of 61. While Antietam may not have been Hancock's battlefield, it was certainly a stepping stone in his leadership experiences and military career. He steps into a division command. He helps to secure that part of the Union center, helping Richardson's division hang on to the ground they have captured, giving them the morale support that they need under fire, and asking consistently for artillery to come to that division's support. Later in the fall of 1862, when McClellan was removed from command of the Army of the Potomac, there was a lot of opinion about that in the command in the leadership of the Army of the Potomac. And commenting on the situation, Hancock said, "I am telling the gentlemen around me, we are serving no one man. We are serving our country." And whether it's at Antietam or any of the other battlefields where we see Hancock fighting, that principle carries out. He saw his military service as service to the country. And you don't know which battlefield will be the one that history will later say the Union was saved. And he performed his duty at a high level in all the battles that he fought, including Antietam. Thank you.